as soon as they get them, like we're being told, down to the precincts, they really drill them and torture them and want them to renounce the truth and say wrong things about the brothers.
Thank you, Polly. Nice comment. Tyson?
The scriptures indicate that Jesus is our Passover lamb. So going back to John 3:16, we want to make sure that we put and exercise our faith in Jesus where we can, especially as the other commenters have brought out, remaining no part of the world, staying neutral, making sure that we take our stand for true worship when it's clear that it's true worship.
Nice comment, Tyson. Thank you so much indeed. Maybe in the future, probably, not maybe, we will need to show that we are courageous and that we are trusting on Jehovah. We will need to make decisions. Sometimes maybe it won't sound very logical because people will hate us for doing certain things just like they had in Egyptians' days, you know. We will need to make decisions, but we will need to show that we completely trust in Jehovah, and we will need a lot of courage, just as the Egyptians, just as the Israelites done in this situation. If you think about just some background about this god Ammon and how they trusted on this god, when the Egyptians went to war and the treasuries of that war, the major part went to the priests, to the priests who served this god Ammon-Ra. So those priests, they were very rich, and on a certain point, one of those priests, he even became pharaoh. The Inside Book tells us, under the reign of that pharaoh, the priests were able to do whatever they wanted. They were able to allow the biggest crimes. How did they do that? Well, if they knew if certain battle would be beneficial for them, they would say, well, you know, the oracle of Ammon, the god said to go into battle with this or this and so on, because they would benefit from it. So, as you can see, friends, false worship took a very big role for the Egyptians. Even on a certain scale, those priests, this god, sometimes he had more power than the pharaoh himself, because they overruled him, saying so and so. The god Ammon-Ra said so and so, so they need to listen to this god. How different, friends! If you think about how Jehovah, Bible tells us, your word is truth. How nice to think about what a kind of loving Father Jehovah is in comparison with false religion, in comparison with all those false gods that the Egyptians had, and how they treated people. Okay, friends, let's head back to our museum here. Let's walk a bit further. So Ammon-Ra, 10th plague. We are going to head towards the upper floor. We are going to take the elevator or the stairways here. Here's the elevator. We're going to head to the upper floor. Voila. No sweating, no problem, no exercise. We're already here. So this hall here, this is the hall of the Egyptian funerary archaeology. If you look, we're going to closely focus here on a site we have over here. This is a mummified animal. This is a mummified bull. Let's have a look in the Bibles in Exodus 32 verse 4 to see what role this mummified bull played for the Israelites. Who would like to read that, please? So Exodus chapter 32 verse 4. The Aaron family, please.
Then he took the gold from them and he formed it with an engraving tool and made it into a statue of a calf. They began to say, This is your God, O Israel, who led you out of the land of Egypt.
Thank you so much, Alan family. So they made a god, they made a statue of a calf, and they start worshipping it. So this is a mummified bull. How much time was there between the 10th plague and the time that they built this golden calf? It was only 2 months before they got astray and they started worshipping idolatry. If you look at the next image, this is the worship of the Apis, the bull god. So, why did the Israelites, why did they build a bull? Why did they not build like a frog or maybe like a falcon? Why did they build a bull? Alpha?
They had been influenced by their surroundings living in Egypt, and that's what they saw worship. So when they thought of worshiping a tangible God, that was probably one of the first things they thought of.
Yes, thank you so much, Alpha. Indeed, they were influenced. This god Apis, he was one of the first gods. He might have been the first gods of Egypt, or at least the first animal associated with divinity and eternity. And this was part of their animal worship. They kept a bull into their temples it was called an Apis bull, to worship Apis. And once that animal died, they would preserve it. They would do a public mourning. He was carried on with a lot of ceremonies. It was a very impressive burial of that bull, and that was made in the city nearby, Saqqara called. And even when they the archaeologists, they found in the 19th century a tomb where they found 60 bulls and cows, all embalmed. That's in our inside book, by the way. So this Apis bull, they believe this was an incarnated version of the god Osiris. So for them, this Apis bull was very important, but they made a lot of ceremony around it. So understandably, the Israelites, they took some of those impressions, of those influences in their lives. My friends, this was a situation when things didn't turn out how they expected it. Some uncertain things happened in their lives, and they suddenly they missed Moses, they missed Jehovah, and they started making this bull. A situation where they actually should have been courageous and to trust on Jehovah, but they did not. If you think about that, friends, sometimes what happens in our lives, how do we feel? How do I feel when something very sudden happens in our lives? Maybe our lives are turned upside down. What sometimes happens with us? How do we feel? What is the risk? How can we learn from the Israelites? Or not learn? How can we do better at Tyson?
Our circuit overseer gave a very interesting observation. He says, in the world, people go through trials, they start going to church. With us, we go back, when we go through stuff, a lot of times people end up missing meetings and lose their trust in Jehovah. So it's just a very interesting observation. We don't want that to happen.
Thank you, Tyson. I like your comment. Juria, please. Waller?
And then sometimes we can become impatient if we're not careful. That's what happened with the Israelites. They became impatient waiting on Jehovah and Moses, and then they started acting independently. So we have to be careful not to do that.
Thank you. Desiree? Very important lesson. Thank you so much, Sister Julia.
And also we can forget to depend on Jehovah and forget to speak to him in prayer And that's our open line of communication to continue to speak to him in prayer.
Thank you. Burgundy?
We might even look to other sources. Maybe, we might start to rely on ourselves, or we might start to look at even self-help books or worldly people's wisdom instead of Jehovah's.
Thank you. Polly? Nice to see all your comments, friends. It's really heartwarming. Thank you.
And also, too, we don't want to forget all that Jehovah had done for us. He had taken them out of slavery, out of Egypt. They were alive. They were healthy. They wouldn't have had that. So we don't want to forget, because when we forget, we give in.
That's a nice one. If we forget, we give in. Do we get lost of track if our lives don't go according to plan? We people, we like our lives to go according to plan, right? I like that, my life to go according to plan. And when something very sudden happens, something unexpected, sometimes it's very likely it's possible to lose track. But if we stay close to Jehovah, if we are courageous and trust in Jehovah, we won't be we won't be distracted or be on a side track. Nice. Thank you for your comments, friends. Really good. Let's have a look to the next site here, just around the corner. If you think about Egypt, you think about mummies, right? Think about pyramids, think about mummies, coffins, very nicely made coffins, mummifying. As you can see here, this is a mummy, and this is a coffin. So what would happen if a deceased person would die? They would take out his organs, not all of them, and the heart they would leave into his body. This thing still, one mic is open. Polly, I'm going to mute you. Voila. So they would put his body with the face up, looking upwards, and the face of the deceased person, he would be looking at this this female personality. This would be the coffin. I'll show you on the other image a bit closely, a bit better. So this female representation is the representation of the god Nut. She's outstretching her arms to one side of the horizon, and her feet are stretched towards the other side of the horizon. And she is the god of the sky. So again, if there was one god that needed to be able to protect the Egyptians against darkness, this was the god that also needed to be able to help the Egyptians. But again, Jehovah humiliated this god Nut. So if you focus on this image, friends, is there something particular that you can recognize that people nowadays still turn to if they are looking to know how the future is going to look to be able to predict the future? There's some elements you can recognize next to this Nut person here, Nut goddess. Burgundy? No.
I'm sorry.
We're still on. No problem. Pravina? Wait, first you can first, yes.
Yeah, it looks like the astrology or symbols of the stars that people look at for fortune telling.
Thank you. Very good. The Allen family?
Zodiac.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. This is indeed the zodiac. So, people nowadays, when they want to know how the future is going to look at, they take magazines, they take newspapers, and they read astrology. In those days, Egyptians, they did the same thing, using the zodiac astrology, and it's interesting. the Egyptians, they were not the people who invented the zodiac. It's actually from the Mesopotamian empire, or the Mesopotamian area, that they introduced the zodiac. If you look at let's go back here to this image here a bit close. Let's have a close up. If you look here on the feet of this god Nut, there's a bull. What is he wearing around his neck?
Ankh. Symbol of
And
life.
Jurea?
Is that the Ankh?
Yes, indeed. Very good, Jurea. That's the Ankh. And the Ankh, that's the Egyptian cross.
Mhm.
We're going to, the Egyptian cross was a representation of eternity, of eternal life, very important for the afterlife of the Egyptians. So, if you were rich, you were able to buy a nice coffin, to be mummified, to buy the Book of the Dead. It costed a lot of money. Actually, it was kind of a business that they made also out of the Book of the Dead, because everybody wanted to have a Book of the Dead to be able to go to the afterlife. And eventually they made some kind of a mass production. People who were poor, or not poor, but not so, they were still wealthy, but not the richest people at all. So they made like a bunch of Book of the Dead, like all copies, and they just erased or put in their names so that it would help them to go to the afterlife. All because of false religion. So if you were not able to pay for a nice, decent funeral, you would maybe end up like this person here. This is a 17-year-old young man. He was stabbed in the back. You can actually see the puncture on his back, and his body was thrown into a cave, and the cave was very hot because of the humidity. His body was being brought to was mummified just because of the heat in that cave. The fluids were taken on a natural way out of his body. By the way that the Egyptians would mummify a person, so they would take out the organs and all the brains and so on, and they would cover the complete body for several days in a salty substance that was found in Egypt. It was called natron, whitish substance, and that's how they were able to preserve the body. But as you can see, this young man, his body is very well preserved. If you look on this next image, zoom out a bit. Okay, so this is this young man of 17 years old. So if you notice, so what they did when they died, the Egyptians, in the cave or in the tomb for the rich people, they put in food, they put in pottery, as you can see here. They even mummified their slaves, animals, even wheel chariots. They put it all into the tomb because they believed once the deceased person would be resurrected in the afterlife, he would need all those things, his slaves, his armor, the wheel chariots, and also poor people, they would put in their caves pottery, food, to be able to survive in the afterlife. If you compare that with what Jehovah teaches us, what happens with us when we die, what a relief that we have Jehovah and know the truth about death. Okay. All right, let's go a bit further here. And you're now in room 63, by the way, upper floor, also very popular floor. especially when it's raining outside. And as I said in the beginning of the tour, it rains quite a lot in Britain. And once it rains, people, they go to the British Museum because it's dry and they can see some of the nice things over here. So I already indicated Sister Jurea, I think she said it's Ankh. This is an Egyptian cross. Egyptian cross played a huge role in Egyptian mythology and their beliefs. You can see it a lot in the hieroglyphic language and also in their images they used. This is indeed called an Ankh. And it's interesting how it came into the Catholic Church. The New Catholic Encyclopedia, it says that the cross, it was used in Christian times, but also in non-Christian times. So how did the cross came into the church? Well, a very famous scholar, his name is Vine, he says that by the mid-3rd century AD, pagans were allowed to come into the churches and they were allowed to use their symbols, and that's how it came into the churches and brought in false religion. Another image that is currently not on display, there are thousands of items that the British Museum has, but not all are exposition, they circulate. This is a brick and has some interesting components. In Exodus, verse 1 and verse 8, we read about the bad Pharaoh that stood up. It reads, "In time there arose over Egypt a new king, one who did not know Joseph. But the more they would oppress them, the more they would multiply, and the more they kept spreading out. So they felt sick with fear because of the Israelites. Consequently, the Egyptians forced the Israelites into harsh slavery. They made their life bitter with hard labor, as they worked with clay mortar and bricks, and in every form of slavery in the field. Yes, they made them toil in harsh conditions in every form of slavery." And when Moses and Aaron asked the Pharaoh to let Jehovah's people go, his response was, "You must no longer give straw to the people to make bricks. Let them go and gather straw for themselves." So these Bible verses, they indicate that the bricks of the Egyptians, they were made with straw. And if you think about it, nowadays we don't use straw anymore. Why did they use straw to build those bricks? Is it logical what the Bible is telling us here, that they use straw to make bricks? Well, look closely. If you look closely to this brick, you can see that the straw is together. It's formed together with the clay, and they did tests with the clay of the River Nile, making bricks. They made bricks without straw, and they made bricks with straw. And they noticed that if you make bricks with the soil of the River Nile, you get very vulnerable bricks. They break very easily. But if you add straw to it, it makes it a lot stronger. So the Bible, archaeology, confirms what the Bible is telling us, what the Bible teaches us, friends. And I was referring at the Rosetta Stone about the cartouche. Remember the oval with the name of a person or a king? If you look closely here, you also see an oval. The oval that is indicated over here, or the name of the king, the pharaoh, was Ramses II. He built a lot of buildings, and his name is on several buildings, or a bunch of buildings. I would say he's the most famous pharaoh concerning construction and so on. So, friends, what have we learned on this tour? Why did Jehovah judge Egypt? In the Numbers chapter 33, verse 4, we read, "Meanwhile, the Egyptians were burying all the firstborn whom Jehovah had struck down among them. For Jehovah had executed judgment on their gods. Jehovah humiliated the gods of Egypt. If you look at the complete list, we just touched the surface of some of the gods that Jehovah humiliated. But here you have the complete list of all the gods that Jehovah humiliated. We have learned on this tour, I hope that you learned on this tour, that the Israelites, that they need to be courageous and trust in Jehovah in a situation where they were endangered. They had a fear of their lives. The Egyptians would have been, they were furious that they killed all those rams. Nice example for us, friends. In the future, we will need to make decisions, and we will clearly need to show that we trust on Jehovah. We have seen also situations where the Israelites needed to show that they trust on Jehovah and be courageous, but that they did not do it because some things in their life happened, some turnarounds, uncertain things, and that's also some things that can happen with us when we lose track, when our lives don't go according to plan, just as it went with the Israelites. We saw some information about the gods that they honored, and I hope that after this tour, when you read your Bibles and also in the upcoming weeks doing your Bible reading, it comes to life, that you have a better idea what Egypt was all about. Friends, it was a pleasure having you on this tour. I hope you enjoyed it. Did you enjoy it? Wonderful. It was really a pleasure. What I'm going to do now, friends, if you like, you can unmute. By the way, what I didn't mention, if you did make any audio or video recordings, please delete them. Don't post them anywhere. If you would like to do this tour again, I would love to do it again for you. So I'm going to create some breakout rooms. And then I'm going to hop into the breakout rooms and say hi. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. So, give me a second here. Okay. I have the ability to get to know each other a bit better.
Hello? I don't see anyone.
Hello. I see still some people here in the main room. Polly, can you hear me?
Yes. I don't
Okay.
see on the thing to go into the room, but it just kept me there.